Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, as-salatu wa-salamu Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan. So we're going to go through 21 hadith today. So I put a message out. It's going to be a long night inshallah. So probably going to about 9 p.m. inshallah ta'ala. Probably a bit before that, 8:30, 8:45, then the quiz will finish probably around 9 inshallah. As I mentioned earlier, we have done many events explaining the signs of the Day of Judgment in detail. And many of these are available actually on our YouTube page. There's one, I think it's called On the Road to Damascus, or no, From Damascus to Aqsa, where we go through the return of Isa alayhi salam, we talk about the Dajjal. I've given many talks on the Mahdi and etc., etc. So we're not going to go through a complete narrative telling in this sitting, but rather we'll be focusing on the hadith, and we'll be then deriving fawaid of the specific hadith. So we're not going to be stringing them together per se, just like how we did with the fitnah. The hadith, we're describing the fitnah. We didn't do a full chronological description of the fitnah between the companions, but we filled in the blanks where necessary to be able to understand the hadith. So that's going to be the plan, inshallah ta'ala. We'll certainly have student readers, but there might be a point where I just take over and we'll just read until the end. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Before coming to the signs of the hour, I want to do a summary of the Kitab al-Fitan up until now. So, how did Kitab al-Fitan start? What was the first type of fitna that Imam al-Bukhari alludes to with the first narration that he includes? Yes? Bid'ah, very good. Religious innovation is the worst fitna for the believer because it deprives them of the hawd in the next life. And what worse fitna can be being deprived and being turned away from the hawd of the Prophet ﷺ in the next life. Then the idea that fitna is a communal trial, not just individual punishment. And so the verses that Imam Bukhari brings forward, وَلَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً, that be aware of the fitna that will not only affect those who commit dhulm amongst you. Recognizing that when fitna comes, it becomes a communal trial, even if you might have not deserved it. Then there's a discussion about the frustration with political leadership. This is one of the first hadith as well that Imam Bukhari brings forward about the atharat that people will see after him, and which is basically frustration with political leadership because of injustice, because of preferential treatment and prejudice and that sort of thing. And the Prophet ﷺ explains that this frustration should not be a means to lead to an even worse fitna. And so the very key point here is that when it comes to a person seeing the status quo in the world, sabr and patience is a very important part of a person's overall strategy if they're wanting change. It's not to say that seeing the status quo and the political frustration that people have, a person should be passive and say sabr and not do anything. But it's that the first step should be sabr, to basically cool down the emotions, to cool down the zeal, to cool down the very idealistic thinking that might lead to very reckless behavior. So the sabr enables a person to basically be able to think a lot more clearly and strategically. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, sabr, until what? What was the consolation of the Prophet ﷺ during times of political frustration that we might find ourselves in? What did the Prophet ﷺ say? Be patient and wait for me at the hawd. And so keeping your eye and your heart to realize that the point in this life is to reach the next life safely. It's not to establish Jannah on this earth. The point is to reach Jannah safely. So don't do something that's going to compromise your Jannah, coming from maybe a good place, coming from maybe a place that is frustrated with certain things, but the shaitan can use that to stoke flames, where a person then, as is discussed later, a person starts to vie for their own egos, for wealth, for power themselves. They start to act reckless. They start to be very emotional in the way that they do things, and perhaps the shaitan will swerve them from a path, and perhaps they will lead to a worse fitna that will result in widespread killing that will result in widespread hardship because of their lack of patience. So be patient until we reach the Prophet ﷺ at the Hawd. Then he describes the fact that fitna is not far away, and that when fitna comes, killing increases as a result. So that was what was the term that the Prophet ﷺ said? That they'll come, what was it? Haraj, very good. And they said, what is haraj? Al-qatl al-qatla, right? It's just killing and mass killing and genocides that will start to increase and increase after the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Then he talks about how the fact that the fitan will start to snowball. There was the narration that no fitna will come except after that will be a period of ease, and then a fitna will come that was worse than the fitna before it. Then a period of ease, then a fitna worse than that before it. And so there is this cycle of history of fitna, ease, worse fitna, ease, worse fitna, ease, in this sort of way. And when the killing is there and the fitna is like this, then Imam Bukhari brings forth the hadith for us to remember the sanctity of Muslim blood. Because when the killing is so widespread, then inevitably it might be the case that Muslims are fighting other Muslims. And so the Imam Bukhari is focusing us to remember the sanctity of Muslim blood and the absolute prohibition of taking the life of another Muslim, and many of the hadith that he brings forward here. And of course, there is an exception to the idea of fighting another Muslim, by the way, and this is important because otherwise, what do we say about Ali radiallahu anh and many of the companions that went to war with other Muslims? There is a verse in the Quran, when طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله. If there are two warring Muslims or two ta'ifas of believers, two groups of believers that are fighting, then make reconciliation between them. And if one transgressed against the other, then fight the transgressed one until the command is for Allah. فَإِنْ فَأَتْ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ. And basically, reconcile them with justice. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Allah loves those who are just. And qist is like the highest level of justice. So this is the exception. We should just keep that as an aside for us to understand when we talk about the wars between the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he describes rules to stay safe when the fitan arrive. So part of it we mentioned. Number one, do not fight against another Muslim. Number two, do not get involved or participate in the fitna. Number three, stick with the jama'ah. Stick with the jama'ah. And what is the jama'ah? What is the jama'ah, ya jama'ah? Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, no. I mean, what is jama'ah? When the Prophet ﷺ is jama'ah, there was no Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. What is he referring to? So the ulama say the scholars are the jama'ah, basically the mainstream amongst the Muslims. This is jama'ah, so stick to the jama'ah. And what if there is no jama'ah? There's the hadith says if there's no jama'ah, I mean, yes, you're right, you're correct what you're saying. If there is none, then you should try to. But if there is none, then? Sorry? Did someone say go 40 days? You could? Yes, go into the mountains and basically with your property and sheep and worship Allah there. Basically seclusion. And then make dua to Allah to protect you. So the important dua for protection from fitan. Then Imam Bukhari brings basically a case study of the fitan between the companions. So now a lot of the he brings forward about the fitna between Ali and Muawiyah, and then after that Hassan radiallahu anh marching, then after that Yazid's appointment and the second fitna, and then allusion to, of course, the rebellion from Medina, and then the battle of Harra, etc., etc. And so then Imam Bukhari brings the narrations about this particular instance. So after mentioning all the principles that we've just described about what is fitna, what is the greatest type of fitna, what will happen when the fitna comes, what are the things that people need to start keeping in mind and doing, then he mentions the historical incidences that took place after the Prophet ﷺ between Ali radiallahu anh and Muawiyah radiallahu anh. And afterwards, until then, Imam Bukhari brings the narrations here and describes all the ways that the different companions are discussing it, describing it, accusing other people and having their own commentary on this. It was a great confusion, and a lot of the principles that were mentioned before were brought forth to life there in real time. Basically, the one who works to reconcile and create points of unity versus the one who has only vengeance in their heart. Those are like the two hearts in response to political frustration. There's people who have nothing but vengeance in their heart, as I mentioned, that emotionality, and it blinds them. And this can turn into seeking authority and becoming insincere and just seeking after more dunya, versus people who are looking to reconcile, who are looking to form unities, who are looking for harmony. Those are two different approaches. And that's the ongoing story until now between the believers in terms of infighting and in terms of the fitan that we see around us. And this is the case as well, as you said, in Islamic da'wah organizations in the West. This is also something to understand as well, because there can be infighting amongst us, not physical fighting, but infighting that takes the place in terms of splintering of groups, attacks, refutations, people denigrating other groups and scholars, and divisions in this particular way. Is something that can happen. And again, the source of it can come from that same place of seeking dunya, titles, recognition, relevance, significance. All these things, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us afiyah and protect us from the fitan. Ameen. So now Imam Bukhari goes to the end and starts to describe the fitan that will emerge toward the end of time. Okay, so who wants to read?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولمشايخنا ولكل من يعلمنا ولوالدينا وللحاضرين.
آمين.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى: باب لا تقوم الساعة حتى يغبط أهل القبور. حدثنا إسماعيل.
نعم. So here, this is chapter 22, and basically it is saying that the hour will not be established until يغبط أهل القبور, until the Ahlul Qubur will be يغبط. يغبط is غبطة. غبطة is jealousy, but it is not a negative jealousy. غبطة and hasad are two different things. Hasad is negative jealousy. Hasad is when you want the similar thing that person has, and you also want that person not to have it. Like you don't think that person deserves it. You think you deserve it. Ghibta is when you want the thing that person has, but you also want them to keep it. You're not wanting, it's not a malignant thing. You don't think they don't deserve it. You just want something similar. This is ghibta. If it is directed toward religious blessings, like hifz, giving Quran, giving charity, and these sorts of things, then this is something that's positive. That's a ghibta that's positive. If it's something that is worldly, then it's neutral. Like, unless it gets to the point of wishful thinking and leads you towards haram. But if you, like someone has a nice car, you see they have a nice electric car, and you say, oh, I want an electric car like that, but you want them to keep their electric car, then this is not a problem. This is a ghibta. This is what ghibta is referring to. Having said this, it's important to be wary of the eye. Ayn. The eye is an eye that looks at possessions of people or what people have, and they want it. Not necessarily they want you to not have it, but they want it. It's like a desire that comes from the eye, and there's a force, we believe as Muslims, there's a force that emanates from that gaze that affects the thing. And the way that a person deters and protects from the effect of their own eyes is by them making the dua, MashaAllah, Tabarakallah, Allahumma barik fi, basically, or Barakallahu fiqh. Making dua for them, blessings. There's an explicit hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says, if you see something you like, then you should say, Allahumma barik, Barakallahu fiqh. And in the Quran, there's an evidence of saying, MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. Where is the evidence for this, of saying this when you see something you like? Yes. Surah Al-Kahf, yes. Which? Yeah, which story is this?
The story of the two gardens.
Yes, And so this one, how is this a connection to the issue of making this dua if you're seeing something?
Because the man was claiming that the garden he has will never perish.
So he gave himself ayn. And that's also true. You can give yourself ayn. And so to protect yourself from your own ayn, then you also say, MashaAllah, Allahumma barik. You make dua as well. There is a narration that some of the companions, they would say when they would look in the mirror, Allahumma kama ahsanta khalqi fahassin khuluqi. Oh Allah, just as you've beautified my outward appearance, beautified my inward appearance. Very important. Attribute all success towards Allah. And the gaze is something that's very powerful. And so in this case, the people who are dead will be envied. Now.
حدثنا إسماعيل حدثني مالك عن أبي الزناد عن أعرج عن أبي هريرة
عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة. This Abi Zinad, Al-A'raj, and Abu Huraira, this is the most authentic chain to Abu Huraira. If you see Abi Zinad and Al-A'raj, this before Abu Huraira, this is the most authentic chain to Abu Huraira. And there are many times in which Imam Bukhari will narrate from this. And before them is Imam Malik, so this is a very strong chain in general. I want to point out as well one thing, because I didn't mention it in these classes before. Haddathana, and then here, haddathani. What's the difference? Sorry? Very good. Jazakumullah khairan. So, haddathana is meaning he told us, which means that it was in a like a gathering like this, a class, an actual formal class. Haddathani is he told me personally, meaning that it probably was not in a class. It probably was not in a class. It could have been a small informal thing, and he narrated to him individually, saw him on the street, said, narrate me some hadith, and he narrated it in this way. And you will see other terms. What are some other terms that you see in between? Akhbarani or akhbarana. So that distinction is similar. So what is the difference between akhbarana and haddathana? Yes? Okay, so you say that's interesting. Say haddathana is a hadith class, akhbarana is a khabar class, basically. Not quite. Yes.
He listened and wrote.
Yes.
He listened.
Not too much. You're close. You're very close. Basically, this is according. By the way, the istilahat as well in ulum al-hadith, there are different scholars that look at things differently as well. But from Ibn Daqiq, he basically says that akhbarna is more general than haddathana. So akhbarna could be that a person is reading to the shaykh. So sometimes we actually do that, where the students, or actually that's a lot of the time we're doing that, where the students are reading the hadith, and then the teacher basically gives an approval. Qararun bihi. They don't say anything tacit approval, or they say, yep, you're correct, na'am. And so this is akhbarana. Even though, because technically he didn't say haddathana, he didn't actually say it to them, but this is akhbarana. So this is more general. And it can be used to that. It can also mean that you heard it from the shaykh, but akhbarana generally is more general. Akhbarana is more general. This is according to the muta'akhirin, but the mutaqaddimin, so the muta'akhirin are the later hadith scholars, the earlier ones, it was pretty much synonymous. Like akhbarana versus haddathana was used very synonymously. Another one is, sorry, that's not for akhbarana, that's for anba'na. For anba'na, that's the third one. Anba'na is basically the most general of them all. And it can be used for reading, it can be used for listening. It can also be used, according to the mutaakhirun, it can be used for ijaza. Ijaza, which is permission to transmit. So an ijaza does not necessarily require a person to actually hear every single hadith from the book to attain that ijaza, technically speaking. a sheikh can give an ijaza to transmit a book to a student, even though they didn't read the book with the sheikh, or they might have read partial parts of it. But it's basically like, you know, in martial arts, when someone gives someone like a black belt or this, like the person has seen them, has studied with them, they've seen their progression, and so then the sheikh will then say, I give you ijaza amma, general ijaza, to transmit all of the books and all of the books of hadith, for example, and that sort of thing, even though they might have not studied with that sheikh specifically, but because that sheikh is very impressed with him, so they give them this ijaza. So this is another way in which a person can transmit books authoritatively from the teacher. So there is direct sima'a, listening, there's reading, there's writing, and then there is ijaza. And that's obviously out of the four in terms of connection, the weakest one, because it's not that long with the teacher. So these are the different forms when it comes to this. And so if a person has ijaza, then they can say amba'ana. Although some later will say, no, you shouldn't just say amba'ana because it sounds like you heard everything from the sheikh. You should just say, you know, this I was granted ijaza, or I was given permission to transmit this. Now.
أحسن الله إليك. عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تقوم الساعة حتى يمر الرجل بقبر الرجل فيقول يا ليتني مكانه.
So this hadith, as you can see here, the hour will not be established till a man passes by a grave of someone and says, if only I were at that particular place, meaning if only I was dead. So there's another riwayah of this hadith, by the way, of Abu Hurairah, and it's found in Sahih Muslim. And in this hadith, it says, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لا تذهب الدنيا حتى يمر الرجل على القبر فيتمرغ عليه ويقول يا ليتني كنت مكان صاحبي هذا القبر وليس به الدين إلا البلاء. So this narration is interesting because this narration says, by the one in whose hand is my soul, this dunya will not basically vanish until a man will pass by another grave and he will roll around in the dirt basically. And he will say, I wish I was in this grave. وَلَيْسَ بِهِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الْبَلَاء. And this would not be because of a religious reason, but it would be because of a calamity. So there's two ways to understand this hadith. Either the person that is going through and seeing the grave is a religious, righteous Muslim, and the reason why they wish to be in that grave is because of the widespread fitan, but specifically they're afraid of losing their deen. And that is why the righteous person is wishing for this. The other way to look at it is, it's just a man not necessarily righteous, because of the hardship of the dunya that has come towards the end of times, they wish that they would die. So there are two ways to look at this here. Ibn Battal seems to suggest it's the religious person that's saying, but if you look at the riwayah in Sahih Muslim, it explicitly mentions that this is not because of deen, this is because of bala, this is because of hardship. Although some make a ta'wil and they say the deen here is referring to worship, like, or it's not here, it's in Sahih Muslim, sorry. وَلَيْسَ بِهِ الدِّينِ here, meaning this was not done out of worship. What was the worship? Him rolling around in the grave, but it was a bala, it was a calamity. But Imam Nawawi doesn't like this explanation. And he seems to suggest that this is a worldly calamity that will come towards the end of time, that will make the general masses basically wish that they were dead. Now, for it to be a sign, this is the point, it should be something a bit out of the ordinary. So Wallahu ta'ala alam, you can look at it in both ways, and both explanations seem plausible here. The religious Muslim, because of the fitna of the religion, versus the non-religious. And Ibn Hajar mentions this because he brings forth this other riwayah as well from Sahih Muslim, and he mentions that of the evidences of the permissibility of wishing for death for dunyawi bala or dunyawi calamity is the mafhum al-mukhalafa of this statement. I keep referring to you here. The one in Sahih Muslim, where he says, وَلَيْسَ بِهِ الدِّينِ. This wasn't a religious, as if to say if it was a religious reason, then it would be justified that he was rolling around and wanting basically to be in the grave. So This is something we discussed at the first class, I think, when we talked about Imam Bukhari himself wishing for death and the reasons from a deen point of view that there can be. And subhanAllah, this is something that we see an increase in certainly suicidation and attempts and suicide itself in the modern era. We see this amongst our community as well. I've spoken about this in different places about the importance of awareness of this in a sensitive way, because sometimes if you put too much awareness and focus on this, you can actually put suggestions in people's minds and make it something like that's some sort of forbidden thing inside of a person's head if you talk about things like this too much. But in reality, I think what's really important is for us to recognize outside of this that even from a worldly point of view, temporary feelings and dark thoughts that people have is not necessarily something that's as an indication of weak iman, because there are righteous people in the Quran even who have wished for death, like Maryam alayhi salam during her time of giving birth by herself. The Prophet ﷺ himself, when he said that none of you should wish for death, then he said, وَإِنْ كَانَ لَا بُدْ if he must, then فَلْيَقُلْ, then let him make the dua. If life is good for me, then let me live. If death is good for me, let me die. So it's an indication from this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ is actually validating that for some people, that feeling and those thoughts can become so dark in a moment where they can't help but wish for death. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, then at least then say this dua as almost the outlet. And I think that this is an important thing, for us to grasp. And one of the most important things when it comes to this is that dua is so important. He who has no one has Allah. And oftentimes people are struck with intense loneliness when there are these dark moments and they feel they're completely by themselves and isolated. And he who has no one has Allah and can always make dua. But sometimes you're even in a rut where you can't even feel that love and that presence. And so, it is important for us to normalize this and to normalize, seeking out to speak to your brother or speak to your sister. There's this kind of spiritual bravado that happens because, we're told, and it's true, like the idea of not burdening other people with your burdens, not complaining to other people, complaining only to Allah. These are things that we say in the khutbahs and the mimbars and the classes, no doubt. إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِي وَحُزْنِي Allah, Yaqub alayhi salam says. But realize when people mention these are ideal situations. These are prophets that are being quoted. These are awliya. Believers are of different levels. And no one will say it is haram and a sin to reach out to someone when a person's struggling. And sometimes we feel embarrassed to do that. We feel embarrassed to do that. We feel spiritually embarrassed. We feel like I shouldn't, I should be grateful. I shouldn't lose hope. I shouldn't be the one to reach out to another person because of my problem. I don't want to burden them. I'm sure they have other things that are going on. And, this is a problem. When we feel this sense of shyness, it's a problem. And, I really think that people don't realize how much they're loved because we don't express it as much. We don't express it, but people don't realize how much they're loved unless something like that obviously happens. But people don't realize it, and they don't realize if they reach out the things that people will do for them. People don't realize it. And that's also on us as brothers and as sisters to be a brother, be a sister, to not be selfish, to be emotionally intelligent, to pick up on signs, to reach out actively, to be willing to sacrifice your time, be willing to take a call, be willing to go and meet up, even if it means that you're going to be low sleep the next day for work, even if it means you're going to miss a deadline for something, because this is a family, right? This is family, and this is a home, right? I mean, when you talk about the buyutullah, the homes of Allah that are there, a home is a home, and who lives in a home? Family lives in a home, right? Which family lives in the homes of Allah here? It's the believers. And we're family. And it's just important for us to support each other in this regard. So just an important side point about this when it comes to the idea of dark thoughts and when life doesn't seem worth living, which is a feeling that many people can feel at different times in their life. And as I said, it's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that feeling in that dark void, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Inna ma'al usri yusra. There's a promise. There's a promise from Allah. Allah says, Inna ma'al usri yusra. Like, surely, without a doubt. Like, no doubt. No doubt whatsoever. Ease will come. So being comforted with those words are very important as well during those tough times. The promises of Allah that are in the Quran, the promises of a better day. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. Akhirah, someday that's coming is better than the day from before. Now. See, I want to keep Mu'adh as the reader because he makes dua for me. Alhamdulillah, I'm being selfish now. Now, continue.
باب تغيير
تغيير الزمان. نعم.
الزمان حتى يعبد الأوثان.
Chapter of time will change until idols will be worshipped. تغيير الزمان meaning basically it will be different. The situation will change until يعبد الأوثان. And in Abu Dharr's riwayah, Abu Dharr, not the companion, Abu Dharr, one of the transmitters of Bukhari, it's تعبد الأوثان. That awthan will be worshipped. That's the passive form of the verb. يعبد الأوثان is they will worship the idols. Now.
أحسن الله إليك. حدثنا أبو اليمان أخبرنا شعيب عن زهري قال سعيد بن المسيب أخبرني أبو
Sa'id ibn Musayyib is one of the 7 Fuqaha Medina. You guys are awesome.
أحسن الله إليك.
Ameen. خيرا.
أخبرني أبو هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا تقوم الساعة حتى تضطرب الأبيات في نساء دوس على ذي الخصة وذو الخلصة طاغية دوس التي كانوا يعبدون في الجاهلية.
Very good. So this hadith is an interesting one. So this hadith says that some of the Arabs will return back to idolatry. And this narration specifically says that, and it's an interesting expression, isn't it? It's a bit striking that the backsides of the women of the tribe of Daus. And Daus is, so who narrates this hadith? Abu Huraira. Abu Huraira is from which tribe? Daus. He's from Daus. And he says the backsides of the women of the tribe of Daus will move while going around Dhil Khalasa. And Dhil Khalasa, Bukhari puts, rahimahullah, a commentary here that, sorry, this is not from Bukhari, this is from the narration itself, but it's from the narrator. It's not marfu'an to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he explains that this Dhil Khalasa is an idol of the Daus tribe, basically, that they used to worship in Jahiliyyah. So there'll be the return of this. Now, a few things to mention here. Number one, this expression itself. So this expression, classical interpretation, it says that it refers to the magnitude and volume of people that will be there doing tawaf around this idol, basically, such that the backsides will be moving because of all of later they describe the women will be basically hitting each other, not like hitting physically voluntarily, but bumping into each other is the right word, such that everything will be moving. Now, this is interesting. Sheikh Hamam Sa'id is a modern scholar of hadith, actually. He's about 82 years old, hafidhullah, from Jordan. He says that this seems to be referring to folk dances that are common amongst pagan kind of indigenous tribes, where people go and they do these dances around like the jinga and that sort of thing around their idol. But he also connects it to movements in Arabia that are trying to resurrect the cultural heritage of the Arabs. So there's a move in Saudi of trying to reclaim Lat, Uzza, Manat, and these idols, and saying this is part of our history that we shouldn't shy away from, and we should put as a museum, not to celebrate it, not to worship it, but just that it's there, that people know, and etc., etc. And obviously many are against this, saying that there's a fine line between showing and then celebrating and then putting it out for people to see the idols of Arabia. So this is already starting. But what's connecting that's interesting is Al-Ula. Al-Ula, there's no idols there, but it's a place where the Prophet ﷺ said, on a journey, don't even stay for a moment or get its shade or get its water, just keep going. And what did they do? They built a resort there in Al-Ula, which is where the Mada'in Salih are. And if you look at the people, and this is what was discussed as well, you look at the people who go there, what are the women wearing in these places? Bikinis and all these things, not far from Medina. And basically he's connecting and saying that these places where they're going to make these resorts and put these idols and stuff, he thinks that this is referring to the fact that the revealing women's clothing, the kind of the people who wear this in the heat of the desert in these resorts and the idols that are there, and you start seeing people do these kind of rituals around it and that sort of thing. So this is what he's basically forecasting, which is actually really the actual explicit Zohair meaning of this, because it doesn't seem to be like a very clear-cut, like when you look at this expression in the Shurah of Hadith, they don't really comment on this, saying, oh, this is an expression from Jahili poetry or something like this. I'm not aware of it. It might be, don't quote me on this. I'm not aware of this being like an expression of the Arabs of ancient, for example, like to mean magnitude of people. It was just a very striking, description to be described in that way. And so it makes more sense, rather than this being an ishara of volume, actually explicitly this idea of revealing clothing and the actual culture and the actual cultural dance around the idol. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Naam. You do last one here, inshallah, finish up the chapter.
حدثنا عبد العزيز بن عبد الله حدثني سليمان عن ثور عن أبي الغيث عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا تقوم الساعة حتى يخرج رجل من قحطان يسوق الناس بعصاه.
It's an interesting hadith. The hour will not be established until a man from Qahtan appears driving the people with his stick. So this narration has been connected to another narration that is about a figure called Al-Jahjah. Who here has heard of Al-Jahjah? You guys ever heard of Al-Jahjah? Al-Jahjah, there's another narration. This one's Sahih Muslim. لا تذهب الأيام والليالي حتى يملك رجل يقال له الجهجاء. That the days and the nights will not cease, meaning the day of judgment will come, until a man who's called Al-Jahjah will be in charge. Yamlik will basically be a king, will be in charge. So some people say that this is the guy with the stick in Qahtan. This is the Qahtani guy. This is Al-Jahjah. And Nu'aym ibn Hammad, he narrates from a tabi'i that the Qahtani in this hadith will emerge after the Mahdi and will follow the same course as the Mahdi. So he says this is Al-Jahjah, and Al-Jahjah will come after the Mahdi and will follow the same course as the Mahdi, meaning a righteous ruler, etc., etc. There's a report, it's a weak report from the Prophet ﷺ that says after the Mahdi will come the Qahtani, and by the one who sent me with the truth, he is not inferior to him. He's not inferior to the Mahdi. This is a weak narration though. And so perhaps he's the same person as Jahjah. This is what Qurtubi says. Qurtubi makes this connection. Ibn Hajar isn't as keen on this, and he thinks that this is a bit more negative. The Qahtani here is a bit more negative, like he's driving people with a stick. It sounds very tyrannical rather than a positive thing. Whereas others will say, no, it just shows that he's got his authority and whatnot. And so if that's the case, basically then he would come after Isa alayhi salam, and after perhaps he would be someone that Isa alayhi salam appoints in that place in Qahtan, and he'll be known as Jahjah. Jahjah is an expression about someone very loud in the way that they speak. Al-Jahja. Wallahu ta'ala alam about these figures. But that is Al-Jahja and that is the Qahtani. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Anyone else want to read from the sisters?
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله باب خروج النار وقال أنس قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أول أشراط الساعة نار تحشر الناس من المشرق إلى المغرب.
So this part is a hadith that's in Bukhari actually, but he brings it forth at the beginning here. It doesn't mention the chain, but it's an authentic hadith that's in Bukhari itself, which is referring to the sign, the major sign of the Day of Judgment, being the fire that will drive people towards Ardul Mahshar. So at this point in time, it seems as if there is a small amount of people on earth. Because according to the narrations, there are going to be these massive Armageddon wars. And it's going to kill most of the planet. Like people say 99% of the planet will be destroyed from this. When I say 99%, it's like within every 1,999, within 100, there's 99 people that have died from each family. So these are the percentages we're talking about. And all the human population will be concentrated into one spot. And then this fire will start to come and burn through. And it will take people basically from the south of Yemen all the way to the Ard al-Mahshar, which is by Sham. So this is the one that's referred to here. But it's different to the fire that's in this hadith. Naam.
حدثنا أبو اليمان أخبرنا شعيب عن الزهري قال سعيد بن المسيب أخبرني أبو هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا تقوم الساعة حتى تخرج نار من أرض الحجاز تضيء أعناق الإبل ببصرى.
Yes, so the hour will not be established till a fire will come out of the land of Hijaz and it will throw light on the necks of the camels at Busra. Now, Jazakumullah khair, barakallah feek, bismillah. Now, this hadith is a very interesting hadith because it's happened. So this is a fire, and as I said, this is not the fire that's going to lead right to the Day of Judgment. This is a fire coming from Hijaz. The other one is coming more from Yemen and going up. This one is coming from Hijaz. And so this fire, that basically the light on the necks of camels will be seen in Basra. Where is Basra or Busra? Where? Yes, it's in Sham, not in Iraq. That's Basra. Basra is in Iraq. Basra or Busra is in Sham, okay? In Syria. So Busra, which is where a lot of markets would be and that sort of thing. So in Hijaz, the fire, and in Busra, they can see it. And in fact, it's illuminating the necks of camels, as according to this hadith. Now, this actually happened, and you'll find many commentators will mention this, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Qurtubi, and others, and they talk about the volcanic eruption, 654 after the Hijrah, in the 1200 CE, right outside of Medina, in the Harrat al-Rahat. Harra al-Rahat was basically a volcanic kind of compound area outside of Medina, and basically it erupted and there was lava flow. And Ibn Kathir, he mentions in Bidayah wal Nihaya that he quotes the testimony of a judge, a qadi in Damascus. And he said, I heard a Bedouin tell my father in Busra during those nights when the volcano erupted, they could see the necks of their camels by the light of the fire. Like the day was so illuminated with the fire. And he specifically said, the Bedouin, that, I could see my camel in the night, even though it was dark. And so this was explicitly happening here from the time of the Prophet, from the prediction of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this fire that came from Medina. Now I actually prepared this to show you guys from the Smithsonian Institute here. So this whole thing here is the massive volcano, and Medina is this white area here. Do you see this white? This Medina, and you can even see the masjid right there, Masjid Nabawi. Do you guys see that? No? Do you guys see Medina? I'm hearing no. So you guys aren't seeing it, right? This is Medina. Do you see this white? And do you see the square rectangle here? in the center, that's Masjid Nabwi. This is the volcano here. This is the volcano. So Medina is actually surrounded by volcanic formations, and a lot of the rock is lava rock. And when you go to Medina, you will see the rock is very jagged, it's very rigid, and that's why it was a natural defense of the city. Like when you see it from here, you can see, oh my goodness, what a hard place to attack, right? Like it's surrounded by volcanic ash, and you can't get through this with an army, right? And there's very particular places you have to come around and come in through here. And so this is Masjid Nabawi. I believe this is Uhud. I believe this is the Uhud range. I believe so, but I don't see a compass here. So, in any case, just because you can even see here, like you can kind of see Jabal al-Rumah here. Okay. تفضلي.
حدثنا عبد الله بن سعيد الكندي حدثنا عقبة بن خالد حدثنا عبيد الله عن خبيب بن عبد الرحمن عن جده خفص بن عاصم عن أبي هريرة.
Who's Hafs bin Asim? Qari? That's Hafs an Asim. Fell into my trap. This is just a tabi'i. Now.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
I was wondering who had picked that part up.
يوشك الفرات أن يحسر عن كنز من ذهب فمن حضره فلا يأخذ منه شيئا. قال عقبة وحدثنا عبيد الله وحدثنا أبو الزناد عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة.
What did I say about Abu Zinad, A'raj, and Abu Hurairah? Great.
عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مثله إلا أنه قال يحسر عن جبل من ذهب.
So he's saying that an even more authentic chain says the same thing basically. And he also says يحسر عن جبل من ذهب. Basically uncover a mountain of gold underneath it. So you guys have heard this hadith. This is a very famous hadith about the Euphrates that will disclose the treasures. Some people like to say that this is the oil that was found in the Middle East. Wallahu ta'ala alam. I mean, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said, don't take anything from it, I don't think that this makes sense in terms of the interpretation. It seems that there will be something that will be found underneath these rivers or close to these rivers, and there's an explicit command from the Prophet ﷺ to not take any of the material wealth from it. And it seems like this is going to be, as part of the end of times genre, this will be something that will be a great source of infighting, perhaps, between the Muslims as well. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Anyone else want to read from amongst the sisters before I give it to the brothers here? This will be your last chance. No takers. Come on, guys. Got to take your opportunities. Oh, it's okay. Thank you so much. Excellent. I'm very disappointed. Anyways. Brother, who wants to read?
Why does he just say bab?
It's just chapter. So basically, some chapters of Bukhari don't have a title, but it's to distinguish it from a collection from before. But he doesn't name it, and this is the case in some of the chapters of Bukhari.
حدثنا مسدد حدثنا يحيى عن شعبة حدثنا معبد سمعت حارثة ابن وهب قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول تصدقوا فسيأتي على الناس زمان يمشي الرجل بصدقته فلا يجد من يقبلها. قال مسدد حارث أخو عبيد الله بن عمر لأمه قال له أبو عبد الله.
جزاكم خيرا. Okay. This hadith is interesting because it talks about a time where there will be abundance. So a lot of narrations about the end of times is all about negative, and there's a fitan, and there's great problems, and people are going to want to die. And then now you have this hadith that says there's going to come a time where there will be so much abundance, there's not even a place to be able to give charity. Because we believe in Islam that actually following the end of times will be a time of great prosperity. Be a time of great prosperity. Because Isa alayhi salam will come, Imam Mahdi will come, and so this will happen. And in fact, in our history, this has actually already happened. In Umar ibn Abdul Aziz's time, they actually reached a point in time where they could not find people to give zakat to because no one was eligible to be recipients of zakat. So within their time period, upon the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ and his way, revolutionizing society such in a way, and obviously with the policies of no riba and encouraging things like trade and encouraging the freedom of slavery and egalitarianism amongst a lot of the classism that existed within tribal hierarchies, subhanAllah, it resulted in this thing that seems like a fable in the mind of every socialist, right? That they're trying to achieve. And don't say, oh, this is just a smaller tribe. We're talking about the Umayyads, we're talking about the superpower of the time. And this is a state that they were able to reach, in fact. And this is simply from the fact that when you look at the system and the hudud of Allah, because the point is this, people sometimes are too simplistic to say, oh, the Islamic system has details of every single thing, of every economic policy, such that it'll be flourishing in society. The reality is that Islam comes with very clear hudud, very clear boundaries, very clear red lines. And when people follow those red lines, there's room inside there for ijtihadat and for things to say, well, maybe we can do this. As long as they don't go beyond those red lines, you will find that they will be thriving within that boundary. The moment people exit from these red lines, you will find downstream much social problems. So you take riba, for example. This is a red line. You go outside of this and you want some short-term gain from riba, yeah, within a certain period of time, you're able to get people to basically multiply the amount that they actually own in terms of what they're able to buy and afford. And so they're able to get houses and cars and all these things, even though they're not able to quite afford it yet. And so people are able to enjoy it. But over time, what happens with this system of riba, right? People get into the cycle of debt. They're never able to come out. Inflation of currency, such to the point that the cost of living becomes ludicrous, that everyone starts to feel the heat. The cost of a house itself becomes absolutely out of this world because this red line was crossed. And so now there's nothing to regulate it. And people say, oh, we need some bank regulation, blah, blah, blah. Once you've opened up this box, there is no way back. And so from this riba downstream comes all of these economic problems. And then you have this massive, what riba does as well is it multiplies the separation and the distance between the rich and the poor. Because that's literally what it does. What does it do? It commodifies wealth itself such that the person who has wealth doesn't even need to do anything or invest or take any risk. Just that wealth itself will just increase. At whose expense? The poor guy who needs the money. And so it increases the income gap. It increases the poverty gap, and it what's the word I'm looking for here? What's that? Is it income gap? What is it? No, the gap between the rich and the poor is a term for this. Okay, I don't know. Anyways, yeah, it's just is it like the income gap or the? Anyways, you guys get the point. What I'm trying to say. So that's this. Okay, now you look at something like zina. Zina is a red line. The moment you take that relationship outside of marriage, then you're gonna get the snowball effect of broken homes, dissatisfaction in marriage. Infidelity becomes absolutely rampant. Divorce becomes very, very common. Children are growing up without different parents. They're then becoming delinquent. Then they're going and leading to what? Increased prevalence of youth crime. Then all these criminals are going out and causing havoc, stealing cars and everything like this. And it's leading to this generation of delinquency and degeneracy. Gambling and alcohol, the violence that comes, domestic violence, gambling and addiction and that sort of thing. These red lines that are there for a reason are there to stabilize society. That you have a sober, level-headed, fair society that will eventually go to a place of abundance, which is not just faith, it's something that we've seen in practice. And it's not like, people think this is like a barakah effect, like, yes, if you follow Allah, then magically everything will pop into existence. This is not a mature understanding of the connection between maslahah and khair and following Islam. So yes, there's an element of barakah that we believe, and there's an element of an intangible thing that we believe, no doubt. And we believe in the ghaib and the unseen. الَّذِي يُؤْمِنُ بِالْغَيْبِ. Having said that, this does not dismiss or remove the asbab. The asbab are very strongly connected in this world. You cannot bypass the asbab. That is called a miracle that are given to prophets, for example. Very rare occurrences. And the karamat of the awliya that come here and there. That is not the norm. That is not something you can bank on. So you can't, because you haven't studied, you can't bank on your sadaqah and your dua to get you through to your thing. If you haven't studied anything from the textbook, it's not going to magically pop into your head. Unless you're banking on a karama from Allah and a miracle, Allah can do that. But generally speaking, it's not something on whim that you can wield in this regard. But rather you do all those things, the sadaqah and the salah, and you use this as increased motivation to say, I know I can do well if I just study. Like, sometimes people think, oh, even if I study, I don't think I'm going to do well. Like, sometimes people dismiss the means because they don't think they can reach the objective. The point of the dua and the spiritual aspects is to give you the confidence to take the hard path to get to where you need to go, because then you're confident that this is the path. I know it's hard, but I've made dua and I'm confident I'll be able to get to the end if I put my effort in. So the asbab are so important. You cannot dismiss the asbab with this. And so when we talk about like the sharia and the way it will lead to societal prosperity, it's not something that's like so revolutionary that it's a miracle. Like, you can understand the policies, you can understand the economics of it, you can understand the social dynamics of it, the anthropology, the whatever it may be, the sociology. You can understand that if these red lines are respected, that Allah has established, which are not many, but these are the boundaries. If you play in the boundaries and you enjoy your life and you do the things within those boundaries, which are few, then you will see a thriving of the life, because the threats that will make your life as an individual, your family and society, the threats to the stability of that will be minimized. That is the point. And so here, the idea of abundance is interesting. It's interesting as well, like, when you start to think about the moment that we're in and about the promises that people are making, like the people who are the AI scientists and the things that they're promising that will come as a result of artificial intelligence is what? Abundance. You won't need to work. You won't need anything. Poverty will be solved. It's interesting. And then you read a hadith like this. So, obviously this is coming during Mahdi's time, but before that, wallahu ta'ala alam. Okay, I will read from here inshallah ta'ala. حدثنا أبو اليمان أخبرنا شعيب حدثنا أبو الزناد عن عبد الرحمن عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لا تقوم الساعة حتى تقتتل فئتان عظيمتان يكون بينهما مقتتلة عظيمة دعوتهما واحدة وحتى يبعث دجالون كذابون قريب من 30 كلهم يزعم أنه رسول الله وحتى يقبض العلم وتكثر الزلازل ويتقارب الزمان وتظهر الفتن ويكثر الهرج وهو القتل وحتى يكثر فيكم المال فيفيض حتى يهم رب المال من يقبل صدقته وحتى يعرضه فيقول الذي يعرضه عليه لا أرب لي به وحتى يتطاول الناس في البنيان وحتى يمر الرجل بقبر الرجل فيقول يا ليتني مكانه وحتى تطلع الشمس من مغربها فإذا طلعت ورآها الناس يعني آمنوا أجمعون فذلك حين لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها خيرا ولتقومن الساعة وقد نشر الرجلان ثوبهما بينهما فلا يتبايعانه ولا يطويانه ولتقومن الساعة وقد انصرف الرجل بلبن لقحته فلا يطعمه ولتقومن الساعة وهو يليط حوضه فلا يسقي فيه ولتقومن الساعة وقد رفع أكلته إلى فيه فلا يطعمها. So these are all the different signs that are mentioned here, and a lot of them are already mentioned in Kitab al-Fitan. The two big groups that will fight with each other, and there'll be casualties on both sides following the same religion. The scholars say, some of the explainers say, this is Ali and Muawiyah. The 30 Dajjals. So you think, oh my God, I thought there was one Dajjal. There's 30 Dajjals. What are we going to do? So there is the major Dajjal that's going to come at the end and be the one who comes and the Isa alayhi salam destroys. Then there are the Dajjalun from a linguistic sense, the people who claim to be prophets. All the fake people who claim to be prophets. In another narration, it says 27, 4 of them are women. Then religious knowledge is taken away, earthquakes will increase in number, time will pass quickly, we talked about this, afflictions will appear, haraj, we talked about this. This interesting hadith Imam Bukhari brings at the end, it's kind of like flashbacks of everything. Wealth will be in abundance, that was just mentioned there. People will compete with one another to construct high buildings. This is in the hadith Jibreel. And so this is the idea of which is happening in our times, of course. A man will pass by a grave. We just spoke about this. The sun rises from the west. This is one of the major signs. And when that happens, Iman after that will not be accepted. And then he mentions basically moments and snippets of life right when the horn is blown. So he mentions a person who will put out their garments in front of them to set up shop to sell, but they won't be able to sell, they won't be able to fold it up. Meaning, that's it, the world is over. Or a person who's milked the camel and taken away its milk, and then they've milked it, but they're not able to drink it because the world's over. And then a person will be basically repairing one of the water tanks for the animal, and then it will be established. And then a person will literally have food in his hand, and it will come. And what does this tell us? This tells us that it will come all of a sudden, completely blindside people. People have no idea. People will just be living their life. Okay. Bab Dhikr Dajjal. Bab Dhikr Dajjal. Information about Dajjal. حدثنا مسدد حدثنا يحيى حدثنا إسماعيل حدثنا قيس قال لي المغيرة بن شعبة ما سأل أحد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الدجال ما سألته وإنه قال لي ما يضرك منه قلت لأنهم يقولون إن معه جبل خبز ونهر ماء قال هو أهون على الله من ذلك. Very interesting hadith here about the Dajjal. So basically the companions were scared about the Dajjal because of the descriptions that he'd come with abundance, basically food and water, and he would come with so much. And so they were afraid that they would be tested or they would go astray, because how can we ward off this fitnah and how much power he has. And the Prophet ﷺ says, هُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. That this is not an amazing translation. He's too mean to be allowed such a thing by Allah. Basically, this is something that Allah would not allow. This is something that is like lower than what Allah is or what Allah would allow. So like the scholars differ about how we understand this. So something is being negated here. The question is, what is being negated? So some scholars say what is being negated is that he will have a mountain of bread and a river of water. Like he will not actually have that abundance. It will seem like that, but it's actually not true. That's one camp who says this. The second camp will say that he will have these things, but this will not harm the believers, because the fitna is basically less than Allah's guidance and tawfiq for the believers, and the signs that Allah will give to the believers and the tathbeet in their heart, that Allah can basically guide His servants. It's easy for Allah to guide His servants with a fitna like this. Like, don't think that Dajjal has this power to basically compete with Allah in terms of who He wishes to guide and who He wishes to lead astray. So basically, they do occur, but they don't prove that He's God, and they don't place Him beyond Allah's control. That's what the meaning of huwa ahwanu ala Allah min dhalik is. Or you can say it refers to the fact that it's fake, the facade that He puts forward and the abundance that He is selling to people. حدثنا موسى بن إسماعيل حدثنا وهيب حدثنا أيوب عن نافع عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أراه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أعور عين اليمنى كأنها عنبة طافية. So basically the Prophet ﷺ said that he is one-eyed, he's a'war, and his right eye is as if it is a protruding grape. So there's a deformity in his eye. There's a deformity in his eye. So there's an exophthalmos, or there's like a bulging of the eye that's there. And it appears that Allah Ta'ala alam, that there perhaps is some cataract or some sort of pearly appearance there, that it basically just looks like a smooth grape. حدثنا سعد بن حفص حدثنا شيبان عن يحيى عن إسحاق بن عبد الله بن أبي طلحة عن أنس بن مالك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يجيء الدجال حتى ينزل في ناحية المدينة ثم ترجف المدينة 3 رجفات فيخرج إليه كل كافر ومنافق. So a Dajjal will come and encamp at a place close to Medina, and then Medina will shake thrice, whereupon every disbeliever and munafiq will basically go out towards him. حدثنا عبد العزيز بن عبد الله حدثنا إبراهيم بن سعد عن أبيه عن جده عن أبي بكرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يدخل المدينة رعب المسيح الدجال ولها يومئذ 7 أبواب على كل باب ملكان. So here it is said that around Medina is 7 gates, and there will be 2 angels at each of these gates, and so the terror that's caused by the Dajjal will not enter into Medina, حدثنا علي بن عبد الله حدثنا محمد بن بشر حدثنا مسعر حدثنا سعد بن إبراهيم عن أبيه عن أبي بكر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يدخل المدينة رعب المسيح لها يومئذ 7 أبواب على كل باب ملكان. وقال ابن إسحاق عن صالح بن إبراهيم عن أبيه قال قدمت بصرة فقال لي أبو بكر سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بهذا. Basically all different chains saying the same thing here about Medina. حدثنا عبد العزيز بن عبد الله حدثنا إبراهيم عن صالح عن ابن شهاب. Who's Ibn Shihab? That's good. That wasn't a trap. عن سالم بن عبد الله أن عبد الله بن عمر. So this is Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar. So that's the son of Abdullah ibn Umar رضي الله عنهما قال قام رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الناس فأثنى على الله بما هو أهله ثم ذكر الدجال. So he praised Allah as he's deserving to be praised. Then he mentions the Dajjal. إني لأنذركموه وما من نبي إلا وقد أنذره قومه. That I'm warning you against the Dajjal, and there's no prophet who has come before me except that he has warned the people of the Dajjal. ولكني سأقول لكم فيه قولا لم يقله نبي لقومه. But I'm going to tell you something that no other prophet before me has told their people about. إنه أعور وإن الله ليس بأعور. That he is one-eyed and Allah is not one-eyed. So what's very clear here from this hadith as well, the comparison is that he is going to be claiming to be God. That is Dajjal. He's going to be claiming to be divine. He's going to be claiming to be God incarnate. He's called Masih ad-Dajjal, meaning the false Messiah. So he's clearly going to be claiming to be the Messiah for the Jewish people, for the Christians. He's going to be claiming to be divine. So perhaps people will think he's Jesus, like the Christians, for example. So this is a false Messiah who will be claiming to basically be God in this way. And the way that you know that he's not, of course, is many things, but one of the signs of the Dajjal is the eye itself, the deformity. That Allah will make him have all of this incredible resource, right? When you read the narrations, like the amount of resources he has and what he's able to do, literally point to the sky and the rain will fall. And bring forth all of the wealth and the gold and the silver and the bread and the water. He's able to do all of this. Bring back people's family and have them speak to them. But despite all of that, Allah will make this one thing to show that even though he has all of this, he can't control his own appearance. He cannot control his own defect. Now, a big question comes. Where did he get all these powers? Like, is he a sahir? Is he a magician? That doesn't seem to be a plausible explanation, because if he's a magician, then there's many other magicians. He can do the same thing. There's something unique about what he's bringing. There are some scholars from modern era who believe that the Dajjal will basically be using advancements in modern technology, basically. But the Dajjal himself, from the Zohair reading of the texts, is a human being. And you'll see this as well in his descriptions after. Like, you cannot say that this is, like people say, oh, the TV is Dajjal. One eye, it's one screen, right? Or like an AI bot, for example. I mean, if you want to say a humanoid AI bot who like looks like a human and everything like this, there's maybe a little bit of room there, because he obviously looks like, because the descriptions are here. But generally speaking, he seems like this, but you wouldn't be far off from the text, is what I'm saying. But when you see this, it's very, I mean, we're obviously a product of the time, and that's our bias. And so I'm not saying that this is AI or anything like this, but what I am saying is that it's not AI. Like, if you look at the narrations about what that Dajjal is able to do, it's all stuff that people are now able to do now. Like, for example, if someone wanted to send a video to you right now of your dead parents saying to you something, they can do it in the most realistic way, can't they? Now, how long is the technology such that the robotics needs to catch up, and then you put all the silicone there, and you can make the person look exactly like your parents, make them sound exactly like your parents, and come and walk to you? How far are we away from that? Not very far. This idea of the deception of reality, what's true and what's fake, no one knows anymore now. Like, we're at a point now, and things are getting really quick, and we don't realize this. Like, just within a year, it's gotten so good. Like, before you could kind of tell it's only like a really like bit of the elders that wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But now young people are also falling for AI stuff. Like, they'll look at a picture and be like, oh my God, and they think it's real. And it's like, no, it's AI generated. Like, you can't tell what's reality anymore. You see a video, you'll see an interview, and you'll be like, oh, interesting interview. But like, you can kind of subtly tell. Like, subhanAllah, Allah has given human beings such perception. They can still tell, no, this is not a human. This is AI generated. It's so subtle. You can't explain why, but you can just be like, no, I just feel like the cadence is a little bit off and whatnot. But it's getting to the point still that it's like, wait, is this AI or not? I'm not sure. Like, already this is kind of within our head. So yeah. Is this a supreme intelligent AI agent that's going to come through? Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. May Allah protect us from the fitan. Ameen. حدثنا يحيى بن بكير حدثنا الليث عن عقيل عن ابن شهاب عن سالم عن عبد الله بن عمر أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال بين أنا نائم أطوف بالكعبة. This is an interesting hadith here if you want a description of the Dajjal. So whilst he was sleeping, he was doing tawaf around the Kaaba. He was seeing himself as a dream. فإذا رجل آدم صبت الشعر ينطف أو يهراق رأسه ماء قلت من هذا. So he saw a man basically that was this reddish white complexion, and he asked, who is this? And they said, Ibn Maryam alayhi salam. This is Isa alayhi salam. ثم ذهبت ألتفت فإذا رجل جسيم أحمر جعد الرأس أعور العين كأن عينه عنبة طافية قالوا هذا الدجال أقرب الناس به شبها ابن قطن رجل من خزاعة. So he described him now as a bit more of a bulky man with reddish complexion. So this, when we say reddish complexion, means white. So a white man with curly hair. So a white man with curly hair and has this defect in one eye. No one say this is Mark Zuckerberg, but because he doesn't have the thing in his eye. But anyways, his eye looked like but he's got the curly hair, doesn't he? He's white as well, isn't he? His eye looked like a protruding grape. But it's not too late for his eye to be like this, by the way, just so you're aware. They said to me, he is Dajjal. The Prophet ﷺ said, the man that resembled most is Ibn Qattan. And this was a kafir from before, he died before Islam, and he died in Jahiliyyah, and he was a person that was known, and he was from the Banu Khuza'a. حدثنا عبد العزيز بن عبد الله حدثنا إبراهيم بن سعد عن صالح عن ابن شهاب عن عروة أن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يستعيذ في صلاته من فتنة الدجال. So Aisha tells us she would hear the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم take protection in Allah from the Masih al-Dajjal, from the fitna of the Dajjal. And we know this dua, اللهم إني أعوذ بك من عذاب القبر ومن عذاب جهنم من فتنة المحيا والممات من فتنة المسيح الدجال. And by the way, from this narration, you can see that the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha could hear them. So they weren't said like completely silent. They were said, and this is from hadith. Obviously, fiqh is a different scenario. They'll take other points here. This is just one fiqh from this hadith. Not to say that, because there are other positions in a different madhab that say, silent or, not actually with a voice and whatnot. And don't think, oh no, the hadith is here, they're wrong. Don't think that. There's many other arguments that they will use. But this is just a point that would be derived from this hadith. حدثنا عبدان أخبرني أبي عن شعبة عن عبد الملك عن ربعي عن حذيفة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال في الدجال إن معه ماء ونارا فناره ماء بارد وماؤه نار. So this is indication of that nafi before of the water being actually water. So he's saying that Dajjal will have with water and fire with him, which is very interesting, right? Water and fire with him. What does this mean? We don't know exactly. We don't know exactly what that means. These are cryptic hadith. I shouldn't say cryptic. That's not the right word. These are ambiguous hadith that we don't know the exact meaning because the Prophet is speaking about something in a reality so far away from the technology and the words that are even available to the Arabs at the time. So now these are general words that are being used. What does that mean? He has water and fire. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wallahu ta'ala alam. But what we do know is that it's all fake. The water is the fire and the fire is the water. قال أبو مسعود أنا سمعته من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. حدثنا سليمان بن حرب حدثنا شعبة عن قتادة عن أنس رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما بعث نبي إلا أنذر أمته الأعور الكذاب ألا إنه أعور وإن ربكم ليس بأعور وإن بين عينيه مكتوب كافر. So you get another description here, which is the famous one, that between the eyes, on the forehead basically, بين عينيه, which doesn't necessarily mean like between the eyes and the small little nasal ridge here. Between the eyes is an expression just generally of the forehead. That it is written kafir. It is written kafir. That the believers will be able to recognize. فيه أبو هريرة وابن عباس عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And so there are other companions who narrate the same description here. باب لا يدخل الدجال المدينة. Dajjal will not enter Medina. Time to get some properties in Medina, guys. بسم الله. حدثنا أبو اليمان أخبرنا شعيب عن الزهري أخبرني عبيد الله بن عبد الله بن عتبة بن مسعود أن أبا سعيد قال حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يوما حديثا طويلا عن الدجال. One day the Prophet ﷺ spoke to us a lot about, like a long narration about the Dajjal. فكان فيما يحدثنا به أنه قال, and from it he said, يأتي الدجال وهو محرم عليه أن يدخل نقاب المدينة فينزل بعض السباخ التي تلي المدينة فيخرج إليه يومئذ رجل وهو خير الناس أو من خيار الناس فيقول أشهد أنك الدجال الذي حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حديثه فيقول الدجال أرأيتم إن قتلت هذا ثم أحييته هل تشكون في الأمر فيقولون لا فيقتله ثم يحييه فيقول والله ما كنت فيك أشد بصيرة مني اليوم فيريد الدجال أن يقتله فلا يسلط عليه. So this is the famous incident where he will be outside of Medina and he will try and tell the people basically and make this show that I'm going to kill this person and bring him back to life and will you believe in me from them? And the audience said yes. And so he will actually do that to this man. Some say this man is Khidr, but there's many points to say that Khidr should have passed away by now because of the narration of the Prophet ﷺ. Not that Allah couldn't prolong his life, but there's a narration, the Prophet said, 100 years from now, everyone on earth will be dead. So everyone except for Isa alayhi salam, in that period, 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ, has passed away. But yeah, so in this narration, he will encamp in one of those spots, and it's interesting. One of the mountains that's he's supposed to camp, there's there's a palace there, some built there, yeah, he will say basically, this man, if I kill him, who's saying you're the Dajjal, he's saying if I kill him, will you believe in me? And they'll kill him, and he's put back together. And the person who says now I have firm conviction that this is the case, and then he'll try to kill him again, but he won't be able to. So clearly this guy will have figured it out. Like he would have gone through this whatever process where he was cut in half, then he figured it out, and that's why he wasn't able to do it again. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like if you read between the lines in this hadith, he was able to do this to this man, and this man was smart because he also didn't believe in him. And so this man is seeing this split in half, or he's being split in half, I should say, and it seems as though, this is an ishara, it's not explicit, it seems as though he has understood now how, like this is the point, he's not God. Like he's using something. He's figured it out, and so the next time he tries to do it, he's not able to. So this was a trap. You know how I set you guys traps? So this is a trap, basically, from this. It seems to be the case. This is my reading of it. Wallahu ta'ala alam, but it seems to be this guy, because he's like, you're the Dajjal, I know it. And he goes up, volunteers to be killed and put back together, as if he's trying to figure something out. And then he figures it out, and now they're not able to kill him anymore. And so now it becomes clear. So this is where the tide turns, and probably when Isa descends and whatnot, and things start to go in the other direction for the Dajjal. So this is a turning point here. Who knows if someone amongst you is the smart guy that Allahu Alam. Who knows? If anyone is going to be that smart and clever, it would be. Everyone's scared, like, no, nobody wants that. I won't say it, but I have someone in my head, but I won't say it. Anyways, because I hope may Allah protect us from the fitna and the trials. We shouldn't make light of it. It's certainly a terrible place to be, and you would not want to be in that place. حدثنا عبد الله بن مسلمة عن مالك عن نعيم بن عبد الله المجمر عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على أنقاب المدينة ملائكة لا يدخلها الطاعون ولا الدجال. There are angels outside of Medina, the plague and the Dajjal cannot enter into it. طاعون. You guys remember the طاعون and waba? You guys look at me. COVID? So there was a whole discussion, because then technically COVID shouldn't have been able to enter Mecca and Medina, but there were a few cases that were there in Mecca and Medina, and this is not a new issue. There was the plague of Amwas, which didn't actually reach Medina, but there were other plagues as well that did reach, and people did die, and lots of people died in certain plagues that afflicted the world. And so there were different ways in which people reconciled this narration. Of them is that it wouldn't destroy the entire population, is what it meant. The ta'un is to go in there and settle, but it could maybe come through and here and there. Another one is to say that the ta'un here is specifically referring to the bubonic plague, the very particular bubonic plague in the bacteria, it's Yersinia or something like this. Does anyone know any microbiologists amongst us? Bubonic plague, Yersinia, I think. Medical students, what are you guys studying, man? Come on. I think it's Yersinia. Yeah. Okay, everyone's nodding like, yeah, sounds right. So some say that it's just that's being referred to, that won't enter. Wallahu ta'ala alam. حدثنا لا. Okay, almost done, guys. حدثني يحيى بن موسى حدثنا يزيد بن هارون أخبرنا شعبة عن قتادة عن أنس بن مالك عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال المدينة يأتيها الدجال فيجد الملائكة يحرسونها فلا يقربها الدجال قال ولا الطاعون إن شاء الله. It's interesting that the inshallah is put here with the ta'un. Babu, this is the last chapter, guys. Last chapter in Kitab al-Fitan. Babu Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, and there's only 2 hadith in this bab. حدثنا أبو اليمان أخبرنا شعيب عن الزهري وحدثنا إسماعيل حدثني أخي عن سليمان عن محمد بن أبي عتيق عن ابن شهاب عن عروة بن زبير أن زينب ابنة أبي سلمة حدثته عن أم حبيبة بنت أبي سفيان عن زينب ابنة جحش أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دخل عليها يوما فزعا يقول, and this is a repeat in this kitab. We've already gone through this hadith. You guys remember? لا إله إلا الله ويل للعرب من شر قد اقترب فتح اليوم من ردم يأجوج ومأجوج مثل هذه وحلق بأصبعيه الإبهام والتي تليها. So he made 90. So he went like this. Do you remember? He went like this. 90 in this hadith here, right? He went like this. So this comes here, and this is 90 in the عدة أصابع, the counting of the fingers in that system. قالت زينب ابنة جحش فقلت يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أفنهلك وفينا الصالحون قال نعم إذا كثر الخبث. Last hadith. حدثنا موسى بن إسماعيل حدثنا وهيب حدثنا ابن طاووس عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال يفتح ردم يأجوج ومأجوج مثل هذه وعقد وهيب 90. And Wahib made the number 90, as we mentioned here, the finger and the thumb. And this concludes Kitab al-Fitan of Sahih al-Bukhari. So this chapter here is talking about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Ya'juj and Ma'juj is a very interesting concept that is in the Quran, and it also is obviously in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And we saw how many narrations were about the Dajjal as well. Like so many different companions described the Dajjal. So some very core themes about the end of times that seem to be quite certain anchors about what's going to happen is the Dajjal and Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the return of Isa alayhi salam in this whole situation of what's happening. Everything else, as you can see, there's little explanations here, something happening here, the Euphrates here, there's this abundance here. There's a lot of these different signs that are happening. But the anchors of what we know as believers that we need to recognize and understand is the Masih al-Dajjal, Isa alayhi salam, Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And Ya'juj and Ma'juj is specifically mentioned in the Quran, in multiple places in fact. What are the two surahs that mention Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Surah? Isra? No. Surah Kahf and Surah Anbiya. Very good. Now, who are the Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Where are they going to come from? The majority conventional position amongst the scholars, vast majority, is that Ya'juj and Ma'juj from the time of Dhul Qarnayn have continued to exist and procreate and live in some place that is isolated from the rest of the world, and there is a wall and a gate that is basically keeping them from exiting wherever it is, and they're just content in their spot that's there, and they have whatever risk, whatever place that they're at, it has its own system that is able to cycle, and so it's this isolated community there. This is the vast majority of scholars in the way that they understand the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and basically the wall will be broken down towards the end of time, and these people will come through in swarms. And there's many narrations that talk about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. There are narrations about the size of them and the quantity of them and the volume of them, how they'll come through and rampage and kill so many people, and then they'll kill each other, and basically they will die, and their corpses of their bodies will basically provide fertilizer and basically the raw materials for luscious kind of growth and whatnot from the herbiage, and it'll be able to then lead to this abundance and whatnot afterwards with Isa alayhi salam, and the believers will be basically hiding at this point in a mountaintop. As I said, very few people at this time, because this is after all the Armageddon wars, right? Like 1% of the population is left, if you take this narrative here. Some scholars you'll find, like Mufti Shafi Uthmani, for example, Anwar Shah Kashmiri, a lot of the subcontinent scholars, they seem to suggest that the Dajjal from Dhul Qarnayn's time has already broken out. What did I say? Oh, sorry, yes, thank you. The Ya'juj and Ma'juj from Dhul Qarnayn's time has already broken out. So this has already happened. And they've mixed with basically the tribes in the Far East area, basically. And so Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they say, is like a concept. And the descendants of the original Ya'juj and Ma'juj will basically come through and they will wreak havoc, but they won't be breaking through a barrier or anything like this. This is what some scholars say when in the explanation and tafsir of these verses, but this is a very minority position. And it doesn't fit with the hadith as well that describe, like this hadith about the wall that's there and the hole that's been opened, etc., etc. They will say and make majaz of these narrations and say, oh, this is metaphorical and this is showing that it's close. Wallahu ta'ala alam. So again, at the end of the day, we don't know. We just don't know how it will be. Allah is capable of both of those situations. But the reason why I give that is because sometimes in this genre, some people, especially brought up in Western mindset with this kind of hyper-rationalism, hyper-empiricism, can sometimes be taken aback by narrations like this and say, well, where are they? Like, we've got Google Maps. Like, we can find if there's like millions of people, because that's what they're saying, 999 to one human. So like we're talking like millions and billions of people. Where are these people? Right? If you take all the narrations, right? As we said before, these specific details, a lot of them are had anyways. So it's not the worst thing in the world if a person takes a weak position and makes some metaphorical things. It's not consistent. But the point is that it's a problem, it's a weakness of our iman, it's not a good thing. We believe in the ghaib and it's something that is starting to go away because we want everything in the empirical and the now. Like, this is something Sheikh Abu Isa always mentions. I don't necessarily find this to be the case, but you guys might find this to be the case, where he often says that our parents' generation were a lot more in tuned and connected to the ghaib compared to our generation. So like, for example, if a person is going through some struggle or something like this, they're looking immediately for the means. How do I get myself out of this? Versus you go to your mother and what do they say? Read Ayatul Kursi, pray salah, give some sadaqah. Like that's the immediate response, is to go and resort to the ghaib. Whereas the immediate response of the next generation is to go to the dunya, to try to seek change here, then as an afterthought, okay, I'll make dua. And so there's this kind of disconnect here because of the way we've been brought up, which is a problem. We should always first step be connected to the ghaib, connected to Allah, recognizing their angels, recognizing their jinnat, recognizing their shayateen. And we can't lose this aspect. Qadr and fate and destiny and these sorts of things. There are many reasons, of course, for the decline of this. And so having said this, which is an important message, is for us to be able to say, yeah, if that's the case, then khalas, and it's not a problem. Especially for something like this, where there are scholars who are not doing that for those reasons. Like Maulana Shafi Uthmani, I mean, obviously he's recent, but he's not like coming from some West. You can't say he's some westernized liberal, subhanAllah. He's the father of Mufti Taqi Usmani, who was one of the teachers of actually Imam Zohair. He's one of the leading fuqaha of our time, Hanafi fuqaha from Pakistan. So his father is Mufti Shafi Uthmani, and he wrote a very influential book of tafsir called Ma'arif al-Quran. We have it in English actually here in the library. You can go into Surah Kahf, you can read his explanation of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And so that's his explanation, which is that they've already broken through and they've mixed in to basically Russian and Chinese tribes and that whole area, basically like the Mongolic Turkic people. And there's going to be the recurrences of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Some say even one of the comings was the Mongol invasion themselves, and then there's going to be another one that's going to be towards the end of times and whatnot. So people have this understanding, interpretation, and it's in our tradition. It's not contradicting anything from the Quran, qat'i from the Quran. Is it mapping out every single hadith to a T? No. Is that a problem? Not necessarily. This is the whole point. Like people don't understand the delicate balance about hadith and Quran and how they all fit. I mentioned to you earlier even about the position about how loud you're meant to say the silent parts in the prayer. And I said, look at this hadith. It kind of indicates that Aisha could hear. And I said, but don't think that now you know everything. A hadith conflict. A hadith are different contexts. There are different weaknesses. You can problematize different hadith as well. Lots of different things that you can do with the hadith. So it's not as necessarily a problem. So yes, it's important for us to understand this about Ya'juj, Ma'juj, Dajjal, etc., etc. And the last thing that I'll say is that it's very important for us not to wait for the signs of the Day of Judgment or try to will them into being. And that's not the point of these narrations. That we say, look at how divided our ummah is. Look at how much we are weak and how much people are attacking us. We just have to wait for the Mahdi and he will solve all of our problems. That's not the point of these narrations. You're not supposed to find these narrations and say, okay, I'm going to depend on this and wait for this to happen. That is not the way of the Salaf, and it's not the way of the Muslims. The Muslims are focused on their immediate duty right in front of them. Mubashara, direct action of what it is that they're not thinking about, it will happen. Whatever will happen, will happen. And the narrations don't give us a 4K picture into the future. It's a bit pixelated. It's a bit blurry. So you can't then think, I'm going for the Mahdi and whatnot. Like, it seems to be very near. There's no point for me to do any work because if the AI is Dajjal, then that means in 10, 20 years, the AI agent is going to be here. And so therefore, by that time, the Mahdi is coming in 7 years. Khalas, I don't know, we don't need to worry about Ummah unity. It's going to happen soon. And I'm just going to sit here. You might laugh, but this is an attitude that people actually have. This is not the point. We're not supposed to make this ijtihad and then think this is happening, so we're going. No. We go and move on as if tomorrow is another day. As the Prophet ﷺ said, if the day of judgment is coming, plant the seed for the date palm still. That's the way of the believer. They're not thinking, that's Allah's timeline. We don't need to worry about that. That's Allah's timeline. What's going to happen is going to happen in this timeline. That's it. But it's important for us to do our responsibility and not to be passive about this and wait for the Mahdi or anything like this. And as he said, we don't know what's going to happen, and things will come forward, and you might think, oh, subhanAllah, this, that, and the other. The point is, of course, that we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the fitan, and we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our families from the fitan, around us, in front of us, behind us, the fitan of the deen, the fitna of iman, the fitna of dunya, the fitna of mal, the fitna of children, all of the fitan all around the world, whether they be from desires, from politics, from whatever it may be. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us communities of righteousness and communities that command the good and forbid the evil. Ameen. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us studying of the words of His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this heavy on our scales. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turn these gatherings into gatherings of light in the next life. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us freedom from fitna such that we're able to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the next life and drink from his hawd, from his hands. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gather us in paradise as He's gathered us here together. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gather us with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hearing his words just like He's gathered us here as we study His words 1400 years later. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you all. Jazakumul khairan, barakallah feek. Absolute pleasure. As I said, one of my favorite series with Faith Circle.